This is Automotive Advertising with your host, Jim Flint.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Automotive Advertising Podcast with Jim Flint. I'm here today in Season 2 with Chris Warr. He's our special guest all season long. We're talking about creativity, and whether you binge watch this all at once or binge listen all at once, you can find us all over the place on our Facebook page, on Apple iTunes, the Automotive Advertising Podcast with Jim Flint. But today we're here to talk about one of the 7 C's of culture, which is what's driving this season for automotive advertising. We've had to reinvent ourselves and deliver against a COVID environment. But today we want to talk about who it is that we are. Right, and how important your culture.
Who are you?
Who are we, Chris? Who do we happen to be? Because I think
tough.
when you boil down the creative process, right, all that's left is the culture. Right, it's what are you about and what do you stand for? And that's the thing about creativity. It represents, it manifests, it comes to market in the way in terms of who you are. Because if you can come across as authentic, right? What's authentic? Being true to oneself, right? So I want to talk to you about culture and how important that is. Have you gone through a process with your company where you've defined the culture?
Yeah, I think we're always trying to redefine ourselves. I mean, maybe not big steps all the time, but little things.
Okay.
And I think when you simplify culture down to, what's left at the end of it, you really get to the heart of a story.
Right.
Like it's the feeling, the attitude that you want to inspire or aspire to be, so
sure.
it's these lessons. And at the end of any kind of creative marketing campaign, you want somebody to take away something about you and who you're trying to be.
Right. And I think one of the most famous campaigns, it's brilliant in its complexities, but it's also important in terms of its cultural dynamic, was Nike Just Do It.
Oh, I mean, it's
right?
got to be the biggest, right?
So people look at that creatively and go, I could have come up with that.
Of course you could have, but would you have had the courage
Right.
to pick it out of all the ideas?
And is that would that be the person that you are, right? And so do you ever have those conversations with clients in terms of, because at the end of the day, marketing and advertising, they work with guys like us to help them sell more of something. So when you have these kind of soul-searching questions about who are you, Chris, right?
Yeah.
What's your culture about? What do you find clients resist that conversation or embrace it? And what do you do when you see that kind of coming or going of that conversation?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I think some clients embrace it and some don't. I mean, some want you to tell them what you think and what you think the best idea for them is, and they are open to that kind of input.
Right.
And they want to know about your culture and what you stand for and what you think their culture should be, because they don't.
That's it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What their culture represents in the market.
Yeah, and some people know what they want to say, and they don't really need input. They need a hand. And, we're here to do both, we're
not gonna.
We'll help you dig the ditch, and we'll also draw the plans if you want. So
Right.
either way.
So no, that's good. And we went through a process where we defined our culture, right? And one of our cultural components was having a coat of the armadillo. And I think having a coat of the armadillo is really poignant for the creative process. What in your mind do you think coat of the armadillo means?
I mean, you just have to be able to withstand a lot of, pressure or obstacles from the outside.
Right.
Because, on the inside, we're all soft and mushy. Like, we care about our ideas. Like,
We want it to look good too.
Yeah, we're trying really hard. And when you tell us you hate it, it hurts. Like, so you got to have that thick skin. But we're all on the same team. That's the thing that you have to never lose sight of, is when your client comes to you for a hand or for the plan, whatever it is, you're both trying to do the same thing. And sometimes people look at how to get there differently. And, you got to work through that.
Yeah, and when you look at the culture, I think it helps define too, we're in a very competitive environment.
Oh yeah.
Right? So that is part of the culture. And if we know, for example, that this creative is going to land on Sunday night football, Monday night football, Saturday college football, right? It's all going to be in the context of that kind of programming because our client demands and expects for us to show up in live sporting events. Do you consider the culture of the consumer in the creative concept? Like, do you design an ad so that it's more receptive to that football viewer?
And into the placement of the ad?
Well, not into the buy, right? That's a
Okay.
whole separate thing. But I'm talking about even the creative process, the concept.
I think so. I mean, you want to know who you're talking to. So if we're doing a football commercial, like, yeah, there's some things that we want to consider. I mean, like, football fans are going to have some traits and some features. Maybe we can get away with being, funnier, or we can be more intense, or maybe we have to be louder because it's going to be on in a bar where there's no sound. So our visuals have to be.
They have to pop.
Yeah, they have
right?
to pop.
Yeah.
Or, maybe you go the opposite way. You say, okay, well, anybody in a bar or that's watching these games at a tailgate, they're not paying attention to what we're doing.
Right.
So we're trying to talk to the small percentage that's hyper-focused on the television, and maybe we can connect in a different way. And that depends on your product and, your culture.
It does. So, and let's talk about one of the biggest differences in the culture today than, say, 10 years ago. We've both been in business about 10 years now.
Yep.
And charity and community matter more now than ever before, right? It isn't just that you're in business in the community, but it's like, how are you connected to the community? And there's a fine line there between overselling your contributions and not communicating them at all. Mm-hmm. Do you find that clients are more cognizant of that now, or do they just kind of want to get to the price point, get a deal done, and move on?
I think they're cognizant of it, and everybody wants to get some of the credit. Like, hey, I'm doing some stuff, and because they see other people bragging about it. That's what
Right.
social media is, and a lot of these media outlets now is bragging. I mean, honestly, like when you were 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, if you walked up to someone and said, I volunteer on Thursdays, you would probably get punched, or, the nose turned up on you.
Yeah.
But now that behavior of alerting the world to your behavior is acceptable. And so we're starting to see that creep into a lot of advertising.
Here's what I had for lunch on Thursday, too.
It's everywhere. It's everything. And so, I mean, I think it's natural for them to want to do it. But I think sometimes it's overboard, because when a consumer sees your advertisement and you're talking about what you do, are you really making an impact on them?
Right.
You're just talking about yourself.
I love that you brought social media into the mix, because that is an entirely different platform, and without bringing race, religion, or politics into the conversation, which I think is kind of challenging in today's age.
Oh,
right?
yeah, because it is.
It's
Yeah.
part of the dynamic, because everyone has a platform that they communicate from now. I was watching some of the things that were going on with some of the teams out there, and it made me realize, not only at a professional level, which you might expect, and not only at a collegiate level, which you might accept, but also at a high school level, as they're canceling seasons, the ability for anyone to have a platform to communicate to the world in a moment's notice is right there in front of them. So no longer is the media, right? The social media is actually in the hands of the players. And in some cases, for our clients, they're employees, right? So I think now, culturally, right, it isn't just enough to have your perfectly manicured, well-groomed, polished presence publicly.
Yeah.
But have you gone in and talked to clients about how their employees convey, support, or detract from what it is that they're trying to get across?
We haven't had those conversations with them directly, but I do see the relevance and importance of them. I mean, because your employees are bigger assets than ever. I mean, everybody that works for you is a salesperson.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, more than ever. And now you're getting recommendation requests online all the time. the social credit of reviews and what your neighbor thinks about somebody is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when, everybody wants a friend in the car business,
sure.
right? So when your friend, says this is where you should go,
you go.
You go.
Yeah. Trust the wisdom of the masses for sure, more than you ever would before. As I visit with clients, it can be a blind spot, right? Not understanding that your cultural components internally impact things externally, right?
Yeah. I mean,
and
go ahead.
Go ahead. I hadn't completed my thought. Oh my gosh. When a lot of our industry come from a command and control place, and they say shut it down, the great irony, the great paradox here is it gives more power to the negativity. Because if you have an overwhelming abundance of goodness, and not even greatness, man, just like goodness, like you've got good people, you've got a good culture, you've got a good environment. Nobody's perfect, we get it. But when you silence everyone, you give power to the squeaky wheel. If you bring everybody into the mix and encourage them to post things down these particular paths that are of value to you, right? Customer satisfaction or caring or whatever your C's happen to be, it actually kind of elevates the conversation. For
sure, 100%. And everybody's squeaking at that point.
Yeah.
So like the one squeaky wheel is just
doesn't matter. Yeah, it overwhelms.
Well, I think if you even think about it extremely logically, is that say you spent $100,000 improving the culture in your dealership, and you spend it on the employees that work there. How many people do you have that aren't salespeople? 50, 100, 150?
At least 30% of the employees in a retail automotive environment.
What if all of them sold you one car?
Right.
That makes that $100,000, irrelevant. I mean, maybe you don't even need to spend $100,000. You could probably spend $15,000.
Right.
And you just sold 100 more cars with all you had to do was make somebody smile.
Yes. Do you think in our space anymore that whether it's social media, digital media, traditional media, have we moved from like a performance culture to a creative culture, or a creative culture to a performance culture, or is that always the pendulum swinging back and forth?
Man,
which area do you prefer, really?
Well, I mean, I'm competitive, but I am competitive with being creative too.
Okay.
So I think that it's an individualized thing. I think some people are going to respond to competitive culture, and some people are going to respond to a culture that's not as fear-based as sometimes competitive culture can be, And I think that great managers, they look at each person as an individual and they give them the environment that they need around them to be successful. And that's different, for different people in different departments.
So let's say on a competitive culture, I win when I sell more, do more than the person that I'm tracking against. How do I know when I win in creative culture? Where's the victory lap there?
I think it's in the satisfaction of the job you're doing.
Okay.
Obviously there has to be weights and measures that you have to measure yourself against, but it's not the motivating factor for you when you're in a creative culture. The motivating factor is being part of creating something better than it was the day before. And both sides of the coin are working towards that, because if the competitive guy sells more, then it was better than it was the day before. If the creative guy or the creative culture is in an environment that is more pleasant, more supportive, or whatever the attributes may be, if he's improving that, he's winning as well.
So as we continue to transition and realize that when we boil it all down to who it is that we are, it comes down to culture, right? So that's what we've talked about here today.
Always.
I'm so glad to be able to share those kind of thoughts with you, Chris, and help you take us to the next level here on the Automotive Advertising Podcast with Jim Flint. Chris, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Automotive Advertising Podcast. If you have any questions for Jim or would like to be a guest on the show, please email podcast@localsearchgroup.com.